Today we are going to install the new DRT Motorsports Polaris Razor Pro R and Turbo R Billet hex bar radius rod set, along with a 3-piece radius rod reinforcement plate. These rods and plate fit the 2020 Plus Polaris Razor Pro R and Turbo R, all models. Install time is around 60 minutes. Can be installed by yourself with a difficulty level of intermediate. Tools needed for this job are a 3/8 ratchet, a 21mm socket, a 10, 20, and 21mm wrench, a T40 torque socket, a 6mm Allen wrench, a 3/8 torque wrench, a breaker bar, a hydraulic jack, and stands. And don't forget your safety glasses. So, gather the tools, and let's install. Let's start by jacking up the rear of your RZR until the tires are barely touching the ground. You may need a jack arm extension as you see here to get the proper height. Then, securely place the jack stands under the framework on each side, and remove the jack. Next, it's time to remove the rear wheels. Now, using a T40 torque socket, remove the 4 bolts holding on the factory plastic exhaust fairing, and set it aside. Next, loosen the 4 radius rod bolts at the plate. Do this by using a 21mm socket on the bolt, and a 20mm wrench on the backing nut. This may be challenging, as they are difficult to loosen. You may have to use a large breaker bar to break the nut loose. Space is tight behind the framework, so be patient when looking for the best way to put a wrench on the backing nuts. Now that the bolts have been broken loose, switch to a ratchet to quickly finish removing the backing nuts. Be careful when removing the lower nuts, as they can easily fall under the gearbox, making them hard to find and remove. Next, remove the 4 21mm bolts and the factory radius rod plate, and set them aside. As you remove each bolt, hold the radius rod as it falls from place, and set it on the ground. Now, using a 21mm socket on the bolt, and a 20mm wrench on the backing nut, loosen and remove the 4 radius rod nuts at the hubs, as shown here. Then, remove each bolt and radius rod, and set them on the ground for now. Next, on a workbench or table, place the factory lower radius rods on the table. Now, grab the DRT Billet hex bar radius rods, place them on top, and begin to adjust the heim joints out, to align the holes with the factory rods. This is most easily done by installing the misalignments and bolts on each end of the new rod, and turning the rod until the bolts slide easily through the factory rod holes. Then, set the locking nuts, finger tight for now, as some minor adjustments may be needed on installation. Do the same to the upper set, and you are ready to install your new DRT rods. When assembling, make a note. The upper rods are left-hand right-hand thread, and lower rods are right-hand thread. The lower rods have a small white dot identifying them as the right-hand lower rods. The white dot signifies the lower rod and the inside position. Note: before tightening the locking nuts, use non-permanent Loctite on the jam nuts and radius rod backing nuts. Paint check is also highly recommended. Next, grab the lower DRT billet radius rods and install the supplied misalignments and bolts, starting at the hubs, as shown here. When installing the rods on the vehicle, note that there is a white dot on each rod at one end. The white dot indicates that this end of the rod installs at the chassis or rod plate, not the hub. Then, thread on the backing nuts, finger tight. Now, pick up the new DRT Billet 3-piece radius rod plate, and begin to disassemble it into 3 separate pieces, as shown here. The lower mount, upper mount, and the center connecting plate. Next, install the supplied misalignments and bolts into each lower rod at center. Then, grab the lower plate mount and slide the mount onto one of the rod bolts. Now, hold it up into place, sliding the bolt hardware through the chassis, and thread on the backing nut, finger tight. Then, pick up the other lower rod and slide it through the billet mount and chassis, backing it with the nut finger tight as well. At this point, the second bolt most likely will not line up. We found if you take your foot and push outward on the lower hub mount, it gives you just enough play to align the bolt and slide it through. Next, tighten up these 2 bottom rod bolts, so they still have a little play in them. Do not tighten all the way at this point. Now, follow these same steps you just completed to install the upper rods and billet plate mount. We had to slightly lift upward on the hub to align the bolts more easily. This might be a good job for a buddy to help out with, if one is around. Otherwise, it can be done by yourself, with a little more effort. Next, hold up the center plate into position, as shown here, and begin to screw in the 4 upper Allen bolts, finger tight. To align the bottom bolts properly, grab the top mount and plate assembly with both hands, and push upward until the bottom of the plate slides into place, as you see here. Now, grab the hitching loop, and install the 4 Allen bolts into the hitching loop, and bolt the loop into place. You may have to still lift upward on the rods to give enough play with the plate to line up the holes. Next, using a 6mm Allen wrench, tighten all 8 plate bolts. Now, you can tighten the 4 21mm radius rod plate bolts. These bolts should be torqued down to a spec of 133 foot-pounds. Then, tighten down the 4 outer rod bolts to the same torque spec of 133 foot-pounds as well. Turn the rods ever so slightly, so that the logos show center, and tighten down the lock nuts as discussed earlier. Next, pick up the factory rear plastic exhaust fairing, and reinstall the 2 upper T40 Torx bolts. Then, using the supplied hardware and backing plate, slide the backing plate in behind the center radius rod plate. Install the 2 longer T40 Torx bolts through the plastic fairing and backing plate. Then, thread on the 10mm backing nuts and tighten them down until snug. It should look like this, shown here. Congrats, that completes your DRT, Polaris Razor, Billet Radius Rod, and 3-piece plate install. This 3-piece modular radius rod plate adds strength, reliability, and service access to your side-by-side all-in-one stylish package. The 3D machined hitching loop also starts from a billet aluminum block of 6061 T6 material. Combined with the billet aluminum hex bar radius rod kit, it is designed to reduce weight, increase strength, and add adjustability to your radius rods. These rods are manufactured in the USA on state-of-the-art CNC equipment of aerospace-grade aluminum. Until we meet on your next DRT install, be safe out there. If you have any questions during your installation, don't hesitate to contact us via phone or email. We are here to help.